Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday Leading Change episode this week with David Wallace. Hi David, welcome back.
Hey, glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, David, on Wednesdays, we dive into the whole change universe. We can talk about changing an organization, a team, an individual. Like, these are all change processes that we interact with. Sometimes we are even supposed to be responsible for them. And obviously, that means we need to get really good at understanding what change is and navigating change, whether it is in any of those three layers of organization, team, and individual. So tell us a story of a change process you were involved with, David, and walk us through the step of how that change process happened, but specifically highlight the tools, the tips, the techniques that you learned back then that you still apply today.
Absolutely. Had a situation, I was working for a company based in Atlanta, and we acquired a company in Omaha, Nebraska. And when we acquired them, my boss and I flew out there. I was a senior Scrum Master at that point with the company. And so the two of us flew out to kind of just observe the way they worked and see what it was going to take to mesh their processes with the way the rest of the company was working. And they said that they had been doing Agile for about 2 years. Well, when we got there, we were observing and realized that what had happened was 2 years prior, they had a consulting company come in, do a 2-day Agile training on how to do an Agile transformation. And then that consulting company disappeared and left. And so for 2 years, they had been working off of 2 days of training on what Agile looked like. And so you can imagine that that was not necessarily the most agile process in the world in the end. So as we got in, we looked at it, like they had VPs who were like the VP of quality engineering was also a product owner for one of the teams. The head of engineering was a product owner for a team. There were a lot of different kind of anti-patterns there of those mixed roles, and especially with it being VPs of those roles, where the teams weren't willing to challenge anything that the VPs said as they came in. So the product owners were basically running everything and doing it however they wanted to. So I got to go in there and really listen to what their pain points were. And that was the approach I took, was asking them, okay, what are your pain points? Where are you struggling to deliver value? Where are you struggling in your process? And by hearing those pain points, then we were able to go in and teach them the mindset that you needed to approach that problem. And by addressing the mindset first, the processes actually started fixing themselves. We didn't have to tell them specifically, stop doing this, start doing this. It was more, they started seeing it going, well, okay, I see what you're saying in terms of test-driven development, like thinking about like how you're building the code before you actually write it and what you're testing for, what the outcome you're looking for is. So as they started thinking about that, it started changing the way they were working. We talked about being able to continuously deliver value. And they were like, well, we don't end up doing releases for months. And I was like, okay, that's a problem that your customers have a problem with, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, what can we do to deliver that sooner? What are the things that are causing you to have to go that way? And we realized that they were doing the horizontal splitting of stories rather than vertical splitting and that kind of thing. So was able to coach them through thinking the mindset, which ended up leading us to the right answers for the tools that they needed and the techniques that they needed in order to implement those. So by starting with the mindset, found out what their problems were able to guide them into those correct tools and techniques to be able to meet the needs that they had.
It sounds to me that you got into a place where people were at least not resisting the use of Agile, right? So they were at least trying in
Yes.
their own way to use Agile. And if I understood correctly, your first approach was to start talking about some high level concepts based on the goals of those high level concepts, like, why do we want to do continuous delivery? Well, obviously, because we want to deliver value to customers sooner or even quickly than if we were to split out the work into these different skills and then let them all go out in their different threads and then eventually at some point integrate what would invariably not work well together. So that there was a contrast, if I understand correctly. We're talking about the goals, the benefits of some high level concepts, because continuous delivery is not a practice. There's a lot more behind that.
Absolutely.
And then the team was the one that was responsible for finding their way to get there. Is that so?
Yeah. I they would ask me a lot of questions, and I point them to specific tools or things to think about or read about, and let them. I really was trying to guide them to solve their own problems, to empower them to solve their own problems. But first, they had to even know what those problems were. So yeah, it was interesting, especially because I was based in Atlanta at the time, and here I am trying to lead a change halfway across the country. And I ended up flying out there like I think 4 more times throughout that year. So with 5 in-person visits in a year, we were able to actually make some significant progress in that because each time it was a little bit more change, and then they would build off of that and keep working. And the next time I was out there, they'd be like, okay, here are the things we're discovering now and what challenges are coming up because we solved this problem. Now we're seeing this other problem. How do we solve this? And so it was just incremental change. Definitely approached it with an experiment mindset, like, hey, try this as an experiment. Let's see how that goes. And then from that, let's come back and decide which direction we need to go based on how that experiment turns out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that aspect of approaching it with an experimental mindset is very important, because change is not something that you plan and then it comes out exactly as you wanted it, right? Because this is about systems of people, like teams or organizations, doing things on their own,
Mhm.
and then hopefully getting to the result that is intended, but not necessarily in the fashion that was planned.
Absolutely. And I think one of the key challenges we ended up having there was this company had been being successful. Otherwise, we wouldn't have purchased them, right? They had been doing some good work and had put out a good product. But when they started seeing, oh, wait a minute, we've been working our butts off to do this, where it could actually be easier and we could actually be more passionate about what we're doing if we approach it a little bit differently. That started opening their minds up a little bit. I think when we first came in, there was that self-defensiveness, especially from the VP/POs, where they were like, hey, don't take away our power. But then as they started seeing the changes happening, they realized that by focusing on one role versus the other, they actually had more power to affect change. And some of the VPs actually left their VP role to become full-time product owners. And others kept their VP role and then hired product owners to replace them at that level in order to be able to drive the change they wanted to drive. So it was helping them just kind of see where they were getting in their own way. And by doing that, yeah, it was able to break down some of that fear that they had at the beginning of the change that was coming, and instead empower them to really be able to leverage that change to become more productive and actually enjoy their work more.
Absolutely. And that's another aspect that we need to be aware of when it comes to change, that there's always going to be some fear involved. If you don't know where it is, it's because you haven't looked hard enough.
Absolutely. And if we try to gloss over that fear, if we try to go in and ignore that fear is there and just sell them on the positives of it, then they aren't going to hear you. But you have to be willing to address that fear and say, hey, I realize that change can be difficult, it can be scary. I'm not here to take away your power. I'm actually here to help you do better and enjoy it better, and for the people that are working for you to actually enjoy the process. And happier people are going to put out better products.
Absolutely.
That's just the way we work.
Exactly. It's a great story. Thank you for sharing that, David.
Happy to do it.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role. We'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.